When I was 9 years old, my uncle pressed a sealed envelope into my hands and said 4 words, "Not yet, when you're ready." He died 3 weeks later, a brain aneurysm, no warning, no goodbye. My mother took the envelope from my room while I was at school. She told me it was nothing important. She told me Uncle Owen was a troubled man, a liar, someone who liked to stir things up. I believed her for 22 years. Then, at my cousin's wedding in Charleston, in the middle of the reception, a woman I had never met walked up to me, handed me a second envelope, and said, "Your uncle wanted you to have this when you were old enough to understand." Inside that envelope was a document that proved my entire family had been built on a theft, and I had been the one person they needed to keep in the dark to protect it. My name is Claire Harmon. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of the truth my mother buried, the uncle who tried to save me, and the single hour that dismantled 22 years of silence. The Harmons were what people in our community called a respectable family. My grandfather, Walter Harmon, had built a real estate business in the 1970s. Not from nothing, but from a partnership. A partnership with his younger brother, Owen. That detail, that Owen existed, that he was a co-founder, that his name appeared on the original business registration, was never mentioned at dinner tables. It was never framed in the photographs that lined our living room in Charleston. When guests asked about the company's origins, my grandfather always said the same thing. "I started with nothing but hard work and God's grace." Owen Harmon had a different version of the story. But Owen was eccentric, they said, unstable, prone to exaggeration. By the time I was old enough to remember him, he had already been pushed to the edges of family gatherings, present but somehow invisible, always seated at the far end of the table, always answering questions with a careful pause that made my grandmother nervous. I loved him anyway. He was the only adult in my family who spoke to me like I had an opinion worth hearing. He used to bring me books, not children's books, but real ones, the kind with ideas in them. He'd sit beside me on the back porch of our Charleston home and ask, "Claire, what do you think is fair? Not what's legal, what's fair?" I was 8 years old. I didn't know the difference yet. He was already trying to teach it to me. Uncle Owen. Back porch, summer 1999. Claire, one day someone will ask you to choose between loyalty and truth. Most people choose loyalty and tell themselves it's the same thing. It isn't. I didn't understand what he meant. I wouldn't understand for another 2 decades. But I never forgot the words. The way he looked at the city below us when he said them, like he was already grieving something. My mother, Sandra, was my grandfather's eldest daughter. She managed the family's social reputation the way others manage investments, carefully, obsessively, with a constant eye on returns. She was warm to guests, generous to the right people, and completely ruthless about anything that threatened the family's image. Owen threatened the image, not because he was a bad person, because he was an honest one. He had no talent for pretending. When something was wrong, it showed on his face. When a conversation was dishonest, he went quiet in a way that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. He was the kind of man who could not perform contentment he didn't feel, and in our family, that was treated as a character flaw. Looking back, I think my grandfather actually loved him. I think love and betrayal are not opposites. Sometimes the people who betray us are the people who love us most imperfectly, under the most pressure, with the least understanding of what they are doing until it is already done. But I am getting ahead of myself. In 1999, when Owen pressed that envelope into my hands, I was 9 years old, and all I knew was that my uncle smelled like black coffee and old books, and that he looked at me like I mattered. Nobody else in that family looked at me that way. After Owen died, the official story settled quickly. Heart problem, they said at first. Then the truth, aneurysm, came out, but by then the narrative had already hardened. Owen had been unwell for years. Mentally, emotionally, physically. It was sad. It was inevitable. It was nobody's fault. The envelope he had given me disappeared within the week. My mother said she had found it while tidying my room. She said it was a letter of grievances, that Owen liked to write dramatic letters when he was upset, and that reading it would only confuse me. She said she had disposed of it for my own good. I was 9. I believed her. What choice did I have? Over the years, I asked about Owen occasionally. Each time, the answer was a variation of the same portrait. A troubled man, generous but unstable, who had convinced himself he deserved more than he had built. My grandfather never spoke of him at all. When Owen's name appeared in old photographs, my grandmother would simply turn the photo face down and move on. I grew up in that silence. I finished school in Charleston, studied literature at a university in Charleston, came back, took a job editing for a small publishing house. I was good at reading between lines. It was a skill I had developed early. Living in a family where so much was communicated through what wasn't said, but I had never thought to turn that skill on my own history. I trusted the story I had been given. Most of us do. It is the easiest thing in the world to trust the people who raised you, especially when the alternative is too uncomfortable to imagine. There is a particular kind of loyalty that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with self-protection. The loyalty of a person who needs the story to be true in order to live comfortably inside it. I had been living inside a comfortable story for 22 years. I had never examined its walls too closely. The discomfort found me anyway. It arrived at my cousin Stephanie's wedding on a Thursday evening in March, dressed in a silk deep burgundy dress, carrying a small ivory envelope in both hands. Stephanie's wedding was the kind of Charleston wedding that lasts 3 days and involves approximately 400 people at any given moment. By the second evening, the evening reception, I was standing near the edge of the main hall, half watching the ceremony, half thinking about the editing deadline I had left unfinished in Charleston. A woman touched my elbow. She was older, perhaps 60, with the careful posture of someone accustomed to being precise. A woman who measured her words before she spent them. I didn't recognize her. She had the look of someone who had traveled specifically for this moment, not for the wedding. "You are Claire, Sandra's daughter." "Yes?" She didn't wait for my answer. "I was Owen's neighbor for 14 years. He asked me to keep something for you," he said. "Give it to her when she is old enough to do something with it." She pressed an envelope into my hands. Ivory paper, thick and formal. My name written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize but somehow felt I should. The handwriting of someone who had thought about this moment carefully. Before I could speak, she said, "He was a good man. Whatever they told you about him, he was a good man." Then she turned and walked into the crowd. I looked for her 20 minutes later and she was gone, vanished in that particular way that 400 people make possible. I didn't open the envelope immediately. I walked through the heat and noise of that reception hall, past the tables of buffet tables, and the relatives I barely recognized, and the wedding photographer calling out directions, and I found a quiet bathroom near the service entrance, locked myself in a stall, and stood under fluorescent lights with my heart pounding in a way I couldn't explain. Something about the weight of it, the fact that it had survived 22 years in a neighbor's keeping. The fact that Owen had planned for this, had anticipated that he might not be able to give it to me himself, and had found a way regardless. He had planned for his own death. He had arranged for the truth to reach me eventually, even if it took decades, even if he was not alive to witness it. That level of deliberate care, from a man my family had called unstable and difficult, told me everything I needed to know before I even broke the seal. I broke the seal. If you have ever carried a version of your family's history that felt just slightly wrong, like a translation that almost fits but doesn't quite, comment the word "signal" below. Let me know you are out there. Comment signal. There were 4 items inside. The first was a handwritten letter from Owen, 3 pages front and back, written in careful, neat cursive. The handwriting of someone who had thought hard about every single sentence, crossing things out and rewriting, making sure the words were exactly right. He addressed it to me directly. He said he was sorry for writing something a child might receive before she was ready to understand it. He said he had no one else he could trust with it who wouldn't destroy it. The second item was a photocopy of the original 1974 business registration for Harmon and Sons property stamp. Sons Real Estate. 2 names listed as founding partners, each holding 50%. Walter Harmon, Owen Harmon. 2 names, equal partners, from the beginning. The third item was a photocopy of a 1986 legal document, a partnership dissolution agreement, my grandfather's signature, a lawyer's notarization, Owen's signature. And in the margin, in handwriting I now recognized as Owen's, signed under duress. Witnesses present at time of signing. This document will be contested. The note was dated and initialed. He had known they would try to use it against him. He had documented his own coercion in the margin of the document he was being coerced into signing. The fourth item was a single photograph. Owen and my grandfather, young men, perhaps 25, perhaps 30, standing outside a small shop on a street I didn't recognize, both of them laughing. Arms around each other's shoulders, the casual ease of two people who trust each other completely. On the back of the photograph, in faded pencil, Day 1, 1974. Whatever happens, we did this together. I read the letter 3 times in that bathroom stall. Owen's account was detailed and careful. In 1986, my grandfather had asked him to sign over his 50% share. The stated reasons were financial pressure, company restructuring, the need for a single controlling voice to secure a bank loan that required simplified ownership. Owen had resisted for months. He had asked for legal advice, which my grandfather had discouraged. He had asked for more time, which was denied. He had asked for a fair valuation of his share, which was refused. Eventually, after what Owen described only as sustained pressure I am not able to detail here for reasons you may one day understand, he signed. He received a one-time payment that was a fraction of what 50% of a functioning real estate business was worth. His name was removed from all company materials. He was given a small monthly allowance that was framed as generosity and was, in fact, a mechanism of control. Stop causing trouble, keep receiving the money. He had tried twice in subsequent years to contest the dissolution through legal channels. Both times, the cases had been dropped before reaching any meaningful stage. He didn't explain why in the letter. He didn't have to. By the time I read it, I was 31 years old and I understood enough about how things work in families, with money, connections, and a shared investment in a particular version of events. What Owen wanted me to know, the reason he had given this to a neighbor with instructions to wait, was explicitly not a call to legal action. He was clear about this. He wrote it twice, in 2 different ways, to make sure I understood. He did not want me to fight his battle. He did not want me to file claims or hire lawyers or create conflict that would consume years of my life for an uncertain outcome. He had already tried that. He knew where it led. What he wanted was for me to know the truth. Because, he wrote, "You are the only one in this family who ever asked me what I thought was fair. Not what I was entitled to, not what the document said, but what was fair. And I think a person who asks that question deserves to know why I stopped being able to answer." He wanted me to know because he loved me, not because he needed anything from me, not to use me as a weapon, simply because the truth, in his view, belonged to the people who were willing to hold it carefully. And he believed, had believed since I was 8 years old, asking questions on a back porch in Charleston, that I was one of those people. I sat in that bathroom stall for 45 minutes. Outside, a wedding was happening. Music, laughter, 400 people celebrating the beginning of something new. Inside, my understanding of my entire childhood was restructuring itself around a single new fact: the prosperity I had grown up inside. The house, the school fees, the reputation. The wedding I was currently attending had been partially built on something taken, not earned. Not taken from a stranger. Taken from a brother who had laughed with his arm around my grandfather's shoulders on the first day of something they had built together. I called my mother from the roof of the wedding venue at 11 that night. The city spread out below me, orange and hazy in the way Charleston gets in March, when the air is thick with weddings and dust, and the particular restlessness of a city that never entirely sleeps. She answered on the second ring. My mother phone, March 2023. Claire? Why are you calling so late? Is everything all right? I told her what had happened. The woman, the envelope, the documents. I read her the first paragraph of Owen's letter, the part where he explained who he was writing to and why. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough for me to count 12 seconds. I counted them deliberately because I needed something to do with my hands. Then she says, "Where did you get that?" Not, "That's not true." Not, "You've been given false information." Not even. Who told you this? She said. Where did you get that? The question of someone who already knows what the thing is. The question of a person verifying the source, not challenging the existence of the object. I asked her directly, had she known, about the partnership, about the 1986 dissolution, about what Owen had signed and what he had not been paid for his share. Another silence. Shorter this time. My mother, Owen had problems, Claire. He was not well. What he believed about the company, it was complicated. There were debts. There were decisions your grandfather had to make. You don't understand business. I told her I understood the document in my hand. I told her I understood what 50% meant, and what signed under duress meant, and what it meant that she had taken the first envelope from my room when I was 9 years old and told me it was nothing important. She didn't deny taking it. Not directly. She said she had done what she thought was right for the family. She said Owen had been difficult. She said she had loved him, in her way, and that what had happened was more complicated than any photocopy could capture. She wasn't entirely wrong that it was complicated. Families always are. But complicated is not the same as innocent. And loving someone is not the same as treating them with honesty or fairness, or the basic respect of not erasing their name from something they helped build. I told her I wasn't calling to punish anyone. I told her I wasn't going to court. I wasn't going to the press. I wasn't going to stand up at the next family gathering and make an announcement. I wasn't Owen, trying to fight a legal battle 3 decades old. I was his niece, who had been kept in the dark for 22 years, and I needed her to tell me the truth. Not a version of it, not a careful framing of it, but the actual truth before I could decide what to do next. She was quiet for longer than felt comfortable. Then she said, "Your grandfather made a mistake, and we spent 37 years making sure no one paid for it." It was the most honest sentence my mother had ever said to me about our family. It was also, without her intending it as such, an acknowledgement that someone had paid for it, that the price of hiding the mistake had simply been transferred. Owen had paid it in isolation and erasure, counting down the years in a small apartment with a monthly allowance that kept him dependent and quiet. We stayed on the phone for 2 more hours. I asked every question I had been unable to ask for 22 years. She answered most of them. Not all. Some details she was not ready to speak. Some doors still required more time before they could open. I accepted that. There is a difference between seeking truth and demanding demolition. I was not there to destroy her. I was there to understand. By the time we hung up, it was past 1 in the morning. The wedding sounds below had softened to music and distant laughter. I sat on that roof for a while longer, with the city below and my uncle's letter in my hands, and I thought about the 9-year-old girl who had believed her mother when told the envelope was nothing important. I thought she deserved better, and then I thought so did he. Resolution of what I did and what it cost. In the weeks following the wedding, I thought carefully about what Owen had actually asked of me. Not what he might have wanted, not the justice he had sought in courtrooms and lost, but what he had explicitly written in that letter to me, knowing I would read it decades after he was gone. He had asked me to know, not to act, not to fight. To know, but knowing changes you. You cannot unknow a thing once it becomes real. And once I knew, I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be in the knowledge of it. I did not file any legal claim. The 1986 dissolution agreement was nearly 4 decades old. Owen had no surviving children. The practical path through a courtroom was not one that served anyone still living, and it was not what he had asked for. What I did instead, I went to my grandfather. He was 81 years old. His health had been declining for 2 years, a slow diminishment, the body reducing itself to its essentials. I traveled to Charleston specifically to see him, sat with him in his bedroom in the house I had grown up in a chair by the window that overlooked the courtyard where Owen and I had once eaten lemonade in the summer heat. I told him what I had found. I did not accuse. I did not perform rage or grief. I simply told him, I know, and I need to understand. He didn't deny it. He was too old for denial, or perhaps he had been waiting for this conversation for decades without ever expecting it to actually arrive. He told me his version of events, the debt, the pressure, the choices that had felt necessary in 1986. The particular blindness of a man who wanted something badly enough to tell himself the means were justified. He told me he had thought about Owen every day since. He told me he had not known how to undo it, and so he had done the easier thing, which was to continue. I cried. I had never seen my grandfather cry before. It was a strange and humbling thing to witness. The man whose name was on a building, reduced to an 81-year-old sitting by a window with tears running into the lines of his face, saying, "I was wrong. I have always known I was wrong. I did not tell him it was fine. It wasn't fine. I did not offer him absolution I wasn't in a position to give. What I offered was the truth that I had come there to say. Owen deserved to be remembered correctly. Not as a difficult man, not as an unstable one, not as a cautionary tale about bitterness, but as what he was, a co-founder, a brother, a person who had helped build something and been erased from its history. I asked for one thing, that his names be restored, not in court documents, not in any public announcement that would invite questions or require explanations. Simply, within the family, within the company itself, a small permanent acknowledgement that Owen Harmon had been there from the beginning, that day one had included him, that the photograph on the back of which someone had written, "Whatever happens, we did this together," was telling the truth. My grandfather agreed without hesitation. It was, I think, a relief, the way confessions are sometimes a relief, not because the guilt disappears, but because the weight of carrying it alone finally does. Owen Harmon's name now appears on a small framed panel at the entrance of the company's main office building in Charleston, co-founder. Harmon and Sons Property Stamp, Sons Real Estate, 1974. It is quiet. It is not justice in its fullest meaning. The money that should have been his is long since woven into the fabric of a family I was born into. There is no clean accounting for that. But the truth is stated plainly in a place where it cannot be taken down. And after 22 years of an envelope disappearing and a name being erased, and a man being described as troubled so that no one would look too closely, I think that matters. My mother and I talk differently now. Not easily. We are still learning a new language with each other, one that does not require managing or softening or performing. It is slower and more uncomfortable than the old way, but it is honest. And honesty, I have found, has a specific weight to it that you don't notice is missing until it returns. I think about Owen often. I think about him choosing a neighbor he trusted over any family member, because he had learned that the people who were supposed to protect the truth were the same people who had decided it was inconvenient. I think about his faith in a 9-year-old girl he would not live to see grow up, the decision to leave something with her anyway, to believe that she would eventually become someone who could carry it. He was right about the rooftop. The question is never what's legal. The question is what's fair. And fairness, it turns out, does not require a courtroom or a public announcement or a dramatic confrontation in front of witnesses. It only requires the willingness to say what's true, clearly, carefully, to the people who need to hear it, even when it costs you the comfortable version of your own history, even when it means sitting with your 81-year-old grandfather and watching him cry by a window. Even when it means spending 2 hours on a back porch in Charleston asking your mother questions she has spent decades not answering. Even when the truth arrives 22 years late, in an ivory envelope, from a woman you will never be able to find again. Uncle Owen, back porch, summer 1999. One day someone will ask you to choose between loyalty and truth. Most people choose loyalty and tell themselves it's the same thing. It isn't. I understand now, Uncle. I finally understand what you meant. If you are watching this and you carry a question your family taught you not to ask, I want to say something directly to you. You are allowed to ask it. You're allowed to want the truth even when the truth is inconvenient for the people you love. Wanting honesty is not disloyalty. Silence is not the same as peace. And the version of events that was given to you as a child was designed to protect someone. That someone was probably not you. Give yourself permission to know your own story. The real one. Not the version that was arranged for you before you were old enough to have a say in it. That is what Owen gave me. Not money, not legal victory, not even a full accounting of what was owed. Just the truth in an envelope, kept safe for 22 years, by a woman in Charleston who believed that some things deserve to survive the people who tried to bury them. He believed in me when I was too young to believe in myself. I spent 22 years not knowing what that meant. Now I do. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave me a comment telling me one question about your own family you have never been able to ask. I read every single one. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.